Welcome to a new episode of the Dreambuildrs podcast. I am very excited for this upcoming episode where we're going to talk about how to succeed on purpose. And I am delighted to introduce to you Truth Hawk. Now, Truth is an author, he's a filmmaker, a Hollywood creative entrepreneur, and he spent a lifetime inspiring others to do their best creative work and lead their most fulfilling lives. And he has done this through all forms of media, writing, hosting web series, directing a feature film, executive produced movies, and much more. And of course, we're going to talk about his first book, How to Succeed on Purpose. And I believe it's absolutely an inspirational body of wisdom. So, Truth, I'm very, very excited to have you here, man.
Very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Jochem. Yeah, great introduction. And here it is, How to Succeed on Purpose. So experiential and modern and timeless wisdom that really just channeled through me. So through my years as an entrepreneur, and then also on my own spiritual quest and adventure, and I think settled upon some universal truths that resonate throughout all of time, for maximizing our human experience. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Building the dream.
Definitely. Not true. Before we talk about your book, and I love to mention that we talked about it a bit before we started our conversation. It's kind of it's a book that I love because you don't need to read the entire book to succeed on purpose. You can just open it every day and read your serum. It's a kind of a quote. It's an inspirational source of wisdom in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. And you're like, oh wow, I can actually implement this into my life. It's very, very, very inspiring. I can actually read some because I wrote some down.
Love it. Please do.
Some of the ones that I loved were, instead of saying, I wrote it down here, let me check it. Instead of saying, where are you headed? You can actually say, where are you hearted? I love this one. There's another. It's not fake it till you made it. It's fate it until you made it. And then this one I particularly love. It's towards the end of the book. It says, a redwood seed doesn't think it's a seed. It knows it's a redwood. And perhaps this is kind of, maybe it's difficult or easy to understand, I don't know, but for me it's a very cool way to think about our human potential and the gifts that we have, and that we shouldn't play small, but we should play big, and we should play to our strengths and abilities, and that we're meant to share our gifts with the world. And I really, really love that. We're going to talk about this book, of course. First, I would love to know a little bit more about you, Truth, about your transformational journey through Hollywood. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself and the shifts that you have made to, ultimately align more with your purpose over the years.
Yeah, I shall. Well, since you brought up the redwood, and part of my journey was living in this magical place called Big Sur, and it's in Central California, and there are redwood trees everywhere. And redwoods are essentially the largest living organism on planet Earth, and also the oldest. I mean, they live thousands of years. And so I'd walk through the redwood groves and find these little seedlings. And it just struck me that, like, this little seed turns into the largest living organism on the planet that can live for thousands of years. I mean, it doesn't think it's just, oh, I'm just a tiny little seed, and who am I to grow into anything of consequence? And this is how we sometimes view our own dreams and potential. Like, well, who am I to dare that big? Or who am I to venture and follow my heart, follow my purpose? And can you imagine if all the other trees or animals in the forest were like, you're just a tiny seed, you're not worth anything, you can't become that? Then maybe that seed wouldn't grow into its full potential. But really, the knowing within the seed, which is the same knowing that we have within ourselves, is I'm a redwood tree. I may look like a tiny little seed at this stage, but I'm actually a redwood.
Mm.
That's what I am. And so we all come in with this knowing, this wisdom, and it's within us, and this is the purpose. This is our purpose, living our purpose that, you know, Dreambuildrs and your whole philosophy is about, and as is mine. So there are a lot of synonyms for purpose, and I really think it's about tuning into one's heart and moving out of the head space and moving into a heart space. So that's really been the example of my journey, following my heart, my intuition. I was always encouraged to do so and to follow my instincts growing up. I grew up in New York. I was on my way to Wall Street, I thought. I always loved movies, actually, and would read Premiere Magazine and behind the scenes and how movies were made, and obviously was a big fan of Star Wars and George Lucas and Indiana Jones and all of that. But I didn't really understand, you know, that it could be a career.
Yeah.
And then I happened upon this movie, The Player, and it was transformational. I saw that movie and I shifted immediately to Hollywood. And I graduated on a Sunday, and I moved out to Los Angeles, found an apartment, and started my unpaid internship on my birthday the following Monday, and never looked back. I have this on my website, truthonpurpose.com, but I talk about the journey, and you know, I really modeled myself. I dressed as an intern in a full suit, tie, suspenders, you know, as professional as I could be, completely unpaid, photocopying, you know, scripts, working 80 hours a week. But worked on the Disney lot, and I fashioned myself after Griffin Mill in the movie The Player. And so that really just became an entrepreneurial journey where I would follow my creative muse. I became really the second independent literary manager in the business. I had worked for a producer, I worked for a director, and I was an executive at a production company at Paramount, but I was always entrepreneurially minded. And so literary management was something one other guy had been starting to do, which is representing writers and directors as both a producer and like an agent, an advocate, a representative. And I started working out of my apartment. I quit my job and just started to beat the bushes looking for new talent. And I discovered successfully these New York writers and told them when I read their script, hey, I'll make you $1 million this year. Never having done it, you know, working out of my apartment, you know, answering my own phone. And within 3 months, I'd done exactly that. I'd booked them $1 million in business. I sold a script to Miramax in March, and I was on the set with them in November with Matt Damon, Edward Norton, John Turturro, John Malkovich. That project was Rounders. It's about the underground poker world in New York City. And it just all, you know, took off like a rocket ship from there. So writers, directors, publishing, comic books. I've worked with the Chopra family. I found, executive produced 10 Things I Hate About You. I've been an advocate for a number of female writer directors. And so I had this journey in Hollywood, which I actually still do business in Hollywood quite a bit. And I was living in Malibu, and I just felt like there was something deeper. It's like there was an itch that I couldn't scratch, or
Mm-hmm.
I was had a beachfront home. I was driving a great car, had a terrific family, living the dream, and yet it wasn't completely fulfilling. I felt like there was a higher calling, and so I left Malibu, moved to Big Sur, explored lots of different spiritual practices, helped build a sweat lodge on the grounds at Esalen, which is a center for human potential. I studied Tai Chi and Qigong and became a certified practice leader. I filmed
Wow.
dancers and teachers and Esalen tribal elders and interviewed them, and started a garden and just really lived in community and in nature and traveled the world. And throughout that journey, this book and the material in this book, How to Succeed on Purpose, just started to channel through me. And working as an entrepreneur with so many people, so many artists, and being a creative artist myself as a writer and a director, uh, it gave me an opportunity to really see what it is to apply spiritual principles in a real world setting. So I'm very much about where the rubber meets the road, not like, oh, esoteric insights into self and self-actualization. It's like, how do we make these um, lessons and tools practical? How do we apply them? And how do we treat each other better with more compassion? How do we become active listeners so that we can be our best selves and and achieve entrepreneurial success? I mean, it's really about success consciousness ultimately, and how we define success for ourselves and then live that day
Mm-hmm.
in and day out. And that's what the book's about. That's what I'm about. It's like, how do we live and feel successful every day of our lives?
Well, thank you so much for sharing that truth. And you mentioned a couple of very interesting things. You mentioned that you always kind of follow your heart and not your head. I find that very brave. Um, and you are living now in Lisbon, so I believe that from like the whole journey that you did throughout your life, I believe that adventure perhaps is also part of your life, and trying to look out for new things, going out of your comfort zone. Um, Tell me a little bit about. I would love to know about a time where you were not following your heart and you were following perhaps your head, and what happened in your life.
Well, it's interesting, and so for me, people ask, well, do you live these principles? And I do, but more the principles live me. And so having the insight that we should move out of the dome dwelling of our headspace and into the open field of heart space, that comes from making the mistakes as well and not living
Yes.
from my heart and living the head, and then seeing the errant path that takes me down and then making the adjustment, and oh, by comparison, this is a better way to live. And there comes they're in the experiential wisdom, not I have these truths that I've never lived. It's like this comes out of living the truth.
Mhm.
So for me, each of the practices or lessons or the wisdom, it's about kind of, you lose it and then you have to find it again. Balance, it's like you're not always balanced and centered. I wish that you were, but I think the human journey is about, you find yourself off balance, wait, come back to center, rebalance myself. It's about, maintaining that. So living from my head, yeah, there have been times where, like anyone, so when I talk about heart, it's also intuition, it's gut, it's when we just have a sixth sense about things, and people will ask, well, I'm not in touch with that, I'm very analytical, I don't live intuitively. But we've all experienced this, where there's an opportunity or a client or a deal or a job offer or a potential lover or partner or boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, where we kind of have an instinct that it's not the right thing. There's something off about it, but we can't put our finger on it. And it's like, it's perfect on paper. They check all the boxes. And so we go to others, like, we may go to a parent or an advisor or a mentor or a friend to say, well, what do you think about this opportunity or this person? And they'll be like, oh my God, Jochem, this is everything you wanted. You got to go for this. If I were you, this is the dreaded, if I were you, well, you're not me, but if I were you, I'd do this. I'd go for it. It's what you want. And you think, yeah, okay. But we're asking for advice because we really do know in our heart what it is. So we take this opportunity, this job, this deal, sign this client, whatever it is. And then months later, it goes wrong. It goes off the rails, or it goes pear-shaped, or it blows up. Something happens and we go, I knew it. We've all had that. What is that part of ourselves that knew it? That somehow knew this was not the right course for us? And that is our intuitive self that's connected with, higher consciousness, which higher consciousness knows the future, it knows the past, it knows all our hopes and dreams, it knows our fears, it knows all our unconscious and subconscious desires. And so when we're in tune with that, we're actually in tune with higher consciousness, which is all knowing. So even though in the moment, this looks like a great opportunity, if we're in tune with our heart, our gut, our intuitive self, we actually can predict and feel and see the future. And that's the part of us that tells us, no, it kind of looks right. This looks really good, but no, this isn't for us. And when we trust that, it will never lead us astray. So our head, and I've had this experience, I'm trying to think of like the ideal. Well, there was an example where there was a move actually back to Los Angeles from Big Sur. And I did it to take care of other people. Because I thought that would be the best solution at the time. And for me, moving back to Los Angeles, it was like the last place on earth, literally the last place on earth I wanted to be. But I did it. I did it for, the love of family, which is a great reason, no better reason, to sacrifice your own well-being. And my learning was, it's not a reason enough. There is no reason to ever betray yourself. But in making the decision, people around me were like, okay, there was an opportunity. I needed to leave Big Sur at that moment because there was a fire burning for months. And so it was a time to leave. And my body was even reacting and telling me. And so this is one of the things, like if you're really in tune, you'll feel it intuitively, but then your body will also react. You might feel it in your gut. You might, your throat might close.
Yeah.
But I felt it in my body. And even at one point I said, well, maybe I'll just put my things in storage and travel the world. And in that second, it was like relief flooded in, and the tension went away. And it was like, wow, maybe that's what I should do. And it just came like, if you just spontaneously say, well, what do you think you should do? And not think about it, that's usually the right answer. Like, I can't decide. Well, what do you think? Yes, no, or otherwise, no. And if you don't think about it, that's the right course. but I ignored it and I followed my head and I did the thing that I thought was the right thing to do. And it became a major regret. And it's not like everything goes wrong. You make a decision, there's a path, a fork in the road. This is all bliss, perfection. You'll never have a challenge. It was the right decision. And this is all terrible. You know, it's hell on earth. I say that, you know, the universe, it's a universal chiropractor, right? It's always making adjustments along the way. So you pick the path that isn't your ideal, it's not your path of least resistance, but you still get, you know, some pleasures along the way. But then ultimately, it's not your optimal. It's not your best. It's not the divine path. It's not your heart's path, your purpose path. So that would be an example. And when I look back on it, I thought, wow, that was an act of self-betrayal. And now having learned that lesson, I will never do that again. And so it's a constant checking in with oneself once we learn these lessons, because they come back around again and again in these, what I like to call upward spirals. You know, we have these themes, these challenges, these lessons, and they return to us again and again. The universe keeps checking in like, have you learned it? Have you learned it? And it challenges us at a higher level. But hopefully, rather than just moving in a circle, we're moving in a spiral going upwards. So yeah, let's aspire to upward spirals. Yes.
Well, thanks for sharing the truth. And what I loved about what you said is, of course, that after you've made a decision with your head, there's always this kind of learning lesson, right? That comes in from the universe that tells you perhaps not what to do, but you feel that it's perhaps not the right decision for you, and what then you should change. So I think that's really, really, really cool. And in the beginning of your answer, you were talking about, you know, connecting to the higher consciousness, connecting to your intuition, becoming more heart-centered, and so on. And I just would love to dig into that a little bit further, because that's also the way that you wrote your book, by kind of like channeling yourself open and being kind of, you know, connecting with the source. And that's, of course, where all the creativity starts and where you get access to inspirational wisdom and so on. Can you tell us perhaps a little bit about what you do yourself to become fully connected with the infinite source and to let that creativity flow within yourself?
Yeah. I mean, my own personal practice. So I've guided a lot of meditation and produced a lot of sound journeys. And my definition of meditation, well, what I say is meditation is lovemaking for the soul. It's lovemaking for the soul. And
to some extent it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're communing with the divine, right? So it's like lovemaking, because when we are lovemaking, and if we're doing it right, you know, you kind of lose yourself and you experience union with another individual. And so it's that communion, and, you know, it can be blissful and extremely pleasurable, and so it's doing that on a soul level. And I have a very open definition for meditation. Like you can meditate by going for a walk in the forest. You can be meditating while cleaning the house, by doing the dishes, taking a bath, reading, just sitting quietly, looking at the ocean, at the waves rolling in, or a flower. I mean, meditation is anything that connects you with that still, quiet place within yourself, so that you can hear the divine whispers. It's like we're really eavesdropping. So it's almost like if you were sitting at a cafe and you're kind of listening in to someone else's conversation quietly, you know, without trying to look like you're listening in.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're eavesdropping on the universe. So it's any practice that puts us in that state of quietude, where we we can we get out of our own way is really what it is. And we're not listening to the chatter in our head, but we're listening to something more profound. And when we practice tuning into that, that voice can get louder. And I think it appears, I mean, there's 7.5 billion versions of truth on this planet, human truth. And so each person is going to have their own way of communing with the divine or communing with source and getting into a flow state. So it can be, you know, I know you're a very physical person, physical training, athlete. You know, it comes to athletes through movement, through motion, through by moving their bodies, or a dancer. I mean, I love to dance. That's another form of, you know, meditative practice, or yoga, or doing one's art. It's like you, when you get into that state, that flow state, you just get out of the way, and then you can listen to or feel the divine energies flowing through you. And we know what that feels like because it feels very blissful, you know, and effortless and magical. It's one of the things I say about being graceful, is when you see a performer or an athlete or someone and you're like, they're so graceful, or the way they enter a room, or the way they address an audience as a speaker. Well, really, they're doing their purpose work, their heart work, because grace is gratitude. Like, if you go back to the Latin, or, you know, even the Italian, grazie, gracias. In Spanish, grace is at the core of that. So when we're doing this and moving in this way, or, you know, exercising our art, practicing our art, we are in gratitude, because it's like, wow, man, this feels awesome. I am so lucky I get to do this. I'm so grateful I get to do it. And then that gratitude, while you're doing it, appears as grace to the people that observe you. It's gracefulness. And so that's that sense of grace. If we can move into a place of grace and gratitude for just being able to do the thing that feels good and feels natural, comes to us naturally, well, then we're in the flow, and the divine can just speak through us. And so that's where the channel opened, and I just became a vessel for the material of the book. And I would just show up on the page, and as I was writing, and I wrote it longhand, I'd go on runs, I'd dictate it sometimes, I'd type it into my iPhone, I'd type it on my computer. I was just composing all the time. But what I found was, it was like the words arrived in exactly the right cadence as my pen was moving. I wasn't thinking about what I needed to write. I wasn't planning it. I didn't outline it. It really just came through me, almost moving the pen or my fingers. And I'd get to the end of a piece, and, you know, each of the chapters, as you said, or principles, I mean, they're quite short, 1, 2, 3 pages at the most. But there would be this wonderful sense of not synchronicity, but symmetry, where I'd introduce a concept and there'd be playfulness along the way, and then it would come back around to the concept, and there'd be a nice button, and then I could encapsulate it with the truth serum. And it was just so effortless. It's like, where is this coming from? It's coming from a higher source.
You were so in flow by that time.
I was in flow. And I just really, you know, I gave a talk a few days ago about the Chinese New Year, and I was talking about being one's best self. And this is really when we are our best, when we're being our best selves. And one of the insights I just had recently is, I'm really my best self when I'm helping others to be their best selves. So if I'm guiding someone to discover their best selves, or helping encourage them to live their truth, to be their best selves, that's when I'm at my best. So wow, what a gift that is. And that's when all this material comes through. I get out of the way and just let a higher power speak through me. Because
Awesome.
it's what you need to hear, Jochem.
It,
It's not what I need to say, it's what you need to hear.
well, it's good to hear that you know what your purpose is, right? So you know what your purpose is, and you kind of from that purpose onwards, you take initiative and you initiate things so that you can inspire others to let them be in their purpose as well. And I absolutely love that. Um, Going back to your book, what you said is like, I'm a fan of practical exercises and so on, and all of the inspirational wisdom that you were talking about as well. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about, we talked about, you talked about it already, you talked about meditation, you talked about gratitude, but can you tell us perhaps like about the things that really, that you think from the book is really like, can really help people to experience more like living on purpose and really to succeed on purpose as well?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of truth serums here, and I want to touch on what you had mentioned. But, this idea of the heart, it's like the heart thing, the right thing and the heart thing, they're the same thing. So if you're making a choice, your heart will never lead you astray, right? Your head does. It can give you the bum steer, but your heart never leads you down a path and then says, na, 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 na. I tricked you into doing something,
Exactly.
Wasn't that fun? I played a joke on you. No. If you want a life of no regrets, live from your heart and you will live a regretless life. So the heart, tuning into the heart's guidance, it's like we have that sense of purpose, that sense of success that we define within ourselves. So how do we tune into that? One of the simplest ways for us to start to move into our heart, our intuition, and get a sense of purpose is to just step into a place of witnessing and awareness, where when we have a desire to experience something in the world, like let's say we want to experience love, or we want to beautify ourselves. We feel like we can improve our bodies. We can start dressing better, dressing for success, or we want an ideal partner. Like whatever it is that we're aspiring to do or to have or to become, one of the simplest tools for starting to bring that into our lives, to enhance that within ourselves, is what I call the abundant witness. And all that is when we go out into the world, to just be in awareness of where we're seeing what we want to experience exemplified. So when we see someone dressed extremely well and we're looking to, improve the way we appear in the world, it's noticing that and acknowledging that. And if we can take the step where we actually acknowledge that with the other person, that magnifies it even more. So it's saying like, hey, I really love your outfit. That looks incredibly professional. Like those colors really bring out your eyes. And when we give a genuine compliment, you will see that show up and light someone up when they feel like they're specifically and purposefully complimented. Now, your acknowledgement of, say, how this person appears, the witness within you, the part of yourself that sees it, is the part in you that is the dapper dresser, for example. The beautiful part in you is the part that recognizes the beauty in others. So Source, God, the divine, it's just disguising itself as all these other features. So when you recognize it, it's just the divine recognizing itself, like, oh, hey, I see you over there. in loving partnership, for example, you're missing that in your life, just go out on the street and observe where loving partnership is happening, where you see couples holding hands, acknowledging each other, listening to each other, being attentive, being in sync, and just tune into the feeling that is. Make that acknowledgement, right? Acknowledge them if you can, if that's not awkward to do, but even offering gratitude for, wow, thank you for that affirmation. Thank you for that confirmation of that's what I would like. And not from a place of lack, but like, oh, that's possible. I can see this is what I'd like in my life. The witness that's seeing those things is that part of you that has that potential and will ultimately have that in your life. And so you're enhancing it every time you're witnessing it. So that's just very simple, abundant witness. And that's one way to channel these things that we're aspiring to in our lives, that we see will make us more successful.
I absolutely love that, Truth. That's very, very cool. And thanks for mentioning that. Last but not least, I would like to move on to one of the last questions in regards of time that we have.
Yes.
When we had our second conversation before
Yes.
like after we met a couple of weeks ago, but something that I love what you talked about is fear as the portal to purpose.
Yes.
I just love that. And you have a wonderful question, or a kind of I think it's a question that you actually asked me back then. I don't know if you remember it. Do you remember that question?
I do. Yeah.
So the question is like, think back about a time in your life when you were afraid of something, or when you had to kind of make a leap, right? Like, what did you do, and why do you then become more aligned to your purpose when you make such a step? Can you perhaps tell a little bit more about this?
Yeah.
How we can do that, because I think it's a beautiful example of aligning more with our purpose.
So we all experience fear, right? Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of letting go of our current circumstances in favor of something else. But very likely it's unknown. But fear is really a gift, and fear can be a tremendous point of strength and a portal to purpose, as you said. So the question to ask oneself is, what am I afraid of now? And then to pinpoint a time when you were afraid. And I remember posing the question to you and asking, when was there a time that you were truly afraid of taking something on or venturing forth, taking on a challenge, and then where you confronted it, you stepped into it and overcame it, and the feeling on the other side? So do you want to give us that example of when you were a child and you were standing there on the precipice? And
no, we can talk about that. So, like, when I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old, and it started with that. I remember I was watching television, and I loved the Olympics back in that time. And track and field athletics was one of my favorite sports. Watching Carl Lewis and Michael Johnson, I was like, wow. I didn't necessarily want to be like those guys, but I loved the sport and the physical activity of running and long jump, high jump, and all these kind of things. So at that age, I wanted to join my local club as well. And I remember that my parents brought me to the club, and I was standing there like 5 years old or so, and I was like, oh, now it's really gonna start, and I don't know if I should make the step. And I was kind of afraid to join a new group or to join new people. And I remember I was kind of very afraid and sad of leaving my parents back at that point. But coming back after the 1.5 hour of doing physical activity and meeting new friends, I felt kind of relieved and like, wow, that's amazing. Exactly the kind of things that you were talking about. Now, this kind of things happen more in my life. So while I was training, I had some amazing trainers and coaches as well. And I kind of looked up on them. I really loved how they were creating harmony in groups and how they were training, coaching, inspiring, and motivating people along life. And I kind of felt that that perhaps was going to be some of my work too in the future. So when that opportunity came at the age of 14 or 15, yeah, 14 or 15, I got the opportunity to be a coach as well and train athletes like me at that age. They were a little bit older, they were like 10 and 11, but still being in front of a group at the age of 14, having responsibility to train them and then coach them and inspire them and have fun and all these kind of things. It's kind of a huge feeling when you're at that age, right? It's similar to public speaking. I mean, everybody knows what I'm talking about. So I was afraid, but kind of making that leap and feeling the responsibility of my head trainer, and back in that time I was assistant, to run part of the group, not the entire group. For example, I had like 6 or 7 athletes, and then it went to 10, 11, and then the whole group 30. You know, it's a kind of a great feeling because you see the rewards of what you're doing, and you see yourself growing as well. So it kind of feels like a constant journey of learning and growing and feeling the rewards of you being more in tune with your heart and what you want to do, and eventually still making the decision regardless whether you are scary or not.
Yes.
So that's kind of the story that we talked about last time as well, right?
Well,
yeah.
So let me reflect and just encapsulate, because I love that it was an actual threshold. Like you're a young boy staring at the facility, and then on the precipice, actually needing to step forward into it. So metaphorically, we have to step into things that we're afraid of. But so you were fearful, you stepped into it, and then even after that one event, but then it became your life calling. So it was a feeling of accomplishment, but so much so that it became a life pursuit. Being a trainer, coaching people, physical activity, being an athlete yourself. Usually when we confront a fear, that's a major fear, what's on the other side of it, though, is a sense of, I can do anything. It's more than just, oh yeah, I put that behind me. It's like, wow, public speaking, performing, some major feat that we, like leaving our job and becoming an entrepreneur, maybe for your audience, for example, or going, changing the kind of work that you're doing. Absolutely. Of course, it's fearful because human beings are afraid of the unknown. We do everything to try and, maintain control over our world, but it's really unpredictable. So yeah. Fear of the unknown, but when we step into that and we surpass our fear, the feeling on the other side of it is one of, I can do anything. It's actually like a peak human experience. So it's not just, oh, that was a work challenge or, a hurdle. It's, I'm afraid of this. I'm deathly afraid. I'm going to do it anyway. And then on the other side, wow, not only did I do it, but it was incredibly rewarding, incredibly fulfilling. I may make this my life calling. That is the gift of fear. So fear then, if on the other side is one of these rare human accomplishments, the sense of achievement, then isn't fear really an indicator of where we should head in our lives? It's a gift. It's a flag saying, come this way if you're afraid of it. I'll just use a brief example from my own life. I used to love, talking in front of class when I was young. Then I went through a period where I was so fearful. I would break out in hives. I would get sick. I would be absent from school. I would run out of the class before my time. And I mean, this was a serious fear. And the way I finally got over it was my senior year of high school, I had to do an oral report. So this is like death. And during the research, it was about fear, right? It was fear. So this is true. The number one fear is public speaking. Death is number two. So it is literally a fate worse than death for people. Public speaking is a fate worse than death. So I saw that, and that's what I spoke about. And from that moment on, that was actually a breakthrough moment for me. And so here I am, you know, speaking internationally. I mean, it's become something of a life calling. And I love speaking to people. I love inspiring people. And so that for me was a huge fear to have to get over and get through. And yet on the other side, it's a life calling. So in this funny, miraculous way, these things that we're afraid of are actually the indicators, the green light, like you should pursue this, or at the very least explore it and test your limits and take a step into the fear, because what's waiting on the other side is very likely a once in a lifetime experience that you're going to want to repeat.
100%. So true, so true. Oh, truth. Well, thank you so much for having this wonderful conversation, this very inspiring conversation.
Thank you.
With me. I'm, you know, you're living now in Lisbon. I'm near to Porto, so if I'm going to Lisbon soon, I will definitely want to have a coffee with you, of course, and continue this conversation.
I would love it. I would love it.
You know, before you go, please let us know what the best places are that people can find you and your work if they would love to know more about you, of course.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel, so it's TW Hawk on YouTube. I've got a lot of content there, meditations and inspirational videos. My website is truthonpurpose.com. And of course, my book is available, How to Succeed on Purpose, is available on Amazon. So if you just Google How to Succeed on Purpose and my name, Truth, you should get a list of lots of content, but that would be the ideal way. And I'll be, you know, giving signature trainings online, preferably in person. You know, there'll be meditations available and packages. And I'm also actually, if you go to the algorithm.substack, so Substack is a newsletter and like a blogging platform. But if you sign up for my newsletter, it's called The Algorithm, and it's the algorithm of truth. So how we're optimizing our own truth, and I'm doing exactly this, sharing the experiential wisdom of being an entrepreneur, and balancing that with, you know, our spiritual adventure and tuning into our hearts.
So awesome, guys. If you want to start your own inspirational journey towards succeeding on purpose, I definitely recommend you to go and grab the book. Like, go to the sources that Truth mentioned, or just see the links that I will drop below in the show notes, of course. And Truth, to end this conversation, I would love to know, like, there are several serums that you that you talked about in your book, but if you could close this conversation in one sentence, what would you say?
Well, since Dreambuildrs is really about purpose, and I'm about purpose and succeeding on purpose, well, purpose is really our why, figuring out our why. And once we have our why, the universe responds with why not. So when we know our why, that's our job. The universe responds with why not?
I love that. Thank you so much, Truth.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jochem.